The following program is brought to you free of charge by the sponsorship of Novus Ordo Watch. See for yourself that the Church of the Second Vatican Council is not in fact the Catholic Church of the ages. Go to novusordowatch.org.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Apologetics on member-supported Restoration Radio. I'm your host, Phil Stone, and once again on this episode I am joined by our guest, Bishop Donald Sanborn, Rector of Most Holy Trinity Seminary in Brooksville, Florida. Welcome back to you, my Lord.
Nice to be here again.
In the Apologetics show, we are using the text The Defense of the Catholic Church by Francis X Doyle S.J. And in this show, we continue the last part of a three-part mini-series, so to speak, on the testimony of Christianity to the divinity of our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ. In this show, we'll cover lessons 33 and 34, starting on page 150 of the text. Over the last two shows, we have covered the testimony of Christianity in the miracles of the apostles, the testimony of the Church through to the Council of Nicaea, and the testimony of the martyrs. Now on to lesson 33, entitled The Testimony of Our Lord's Divinity from the Rapid Spread of the Christian Religion. Now, this is something that you've mentioned before in other shows, my Lord, so I'm very much looking forward to you expanding on this subject now. So if you could please take it away from question 167, that would be great.
Yes, people are always looking for miracles. And rightfully so, especially if you don't have the Catholic faith. You need some sort of proof that this is the true religion. And you have to see some sort of intervention of God or stamp of approval from God, we might say, that this is the correct religion. And so one of these miracles that is clear to all if they study history is the rapid spread of Christianity, which is, whenever we say Christianity now, we're going to mean the Catholic Church because that's the only true Christianity.
Yes.
So in the Roman Empire, because Christ ascended into heaven in 33 AD, by 312 AD, which is almost 300 years, you have Christianity legalized, and in another 50 or so years, by 382, it is not only legalized, it is established as the religion of the empire, and paganism is outlawed. That was Theodosius the Great who did that in 382, more or less 380s. And all other false religions were outlawed in the empire. That is it's an unheard of phenomenon, given all of the things against the Catholic religion, given the fact that it did not overtake lands by conquest as the Muslims did, but merely spread its word among populations throughout the empire, and an empire that was very, very hostile to it,
right, from
all points of view. Very hostile, and managed to make progress after progress. Already in the year 150, the ecclesiastical writers were saying, "We are everywhere." That was St. Justin Martyr. He said, "We are everywhere." And they were. They were all over the empire. They were in the Senate. They were in the upper classes. They were in the lower classes and the middle classes, meaning the army, meaning Christianity.
Right.
And so that was only a little over 100 years after Christ ascended into heaven. So we're going to talk about that. How did this Christian faith, how was it spread so rapidly throughout the empire without any human help? As a matter of fact, with all sorts of human obstacles to overcome. That's what we're going to look at. So the author here goes through alleged reasons by rationalists and enemies of the church why there was such a great spread of Christianity. And the first one he brings up on page 151 is that, well, there is the beauty of the Christian religion, you see, and because it was so beautiful, people were attracted to it, you see. And the answer of the author is, yes, it is certainly beautiful, but, he says, to the peoples of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd centuries, Christianity was not welcome, and that is absolutely true.
Right.
It was always persecuted. Almost always. There were certain cases where the emperors let up. It depended on each emperor. But even when they let up, it wasn't necessarily extinguished in all of the provinces. You know, that was a time when there were no cell phones and fax machines and various other forms of communication. So governing something, a piece of real estate, which is, if you consider the Mediterranean Sea in it, which was certainly something to govern, bigger than the landmass of the United States or Australia. When you think of that,
yes,
that was a formidable thing to do when the only thing you could count on was a man on a horse bringing the imperial decrees here, there, and the other place. So there was a lot of localism. See, so, you know, the emperor's decree, you know, it was in Rome. Well, you're over in Asia Minor, which is now Turkey. Well, you know, and how is he going to come around and enforce it?
Yeah.
You know, what is he going to do? And besides that, the populations were so hostile to Christianity that there were essentially lynch mobs against the Christians. They, in one case, there was actually a governor in, I forget exactly where, I think it was Asia Minor, who complained to the Emperor Hadrian, that the people are, and that this is like 130s AD, that the people are so enraged against the Christians that at their spectacles, they demand that the Christians be thrown to the lions. And he was complaining about that to Hadrian, that this is barbaric, that they're dragged out of their homes. They're not accused of any crimes. They are not guilty of any crimes. They have never been before a judge. Yet they are dragged out of their homes and thrown to lions in order to please the populace. You know, so as a matter of fact, Hadrian was so moved by that he ordered that to stop because he was conducting a persecution against the Christians because the Jews had risen up in a very, very brutal manner in Egypt and in Palestine and slaughtered many thousands of people, thousands of Romans and Gentiles. They had risen up. And so he was putting the Christians in the same pot as the Jews. Right. So there was a very strong anti-Jewish feeling in the 130s AD. And that's, by the way, how Palestine got its name, because the Romans had their fill of the Jewish revolutionism, which had shown itself so many times that they completely dispersed the Jews out of what was Judea and what we know today as Israel. Took them all out, just told them, get out. Right. And they called they gave the area a new name that was Palestina. It was no longer the province of Judea. It was Palestina. And so that's where we get the word Palestine from the Romans, from the 130s AD. So it has been it was non-Jewish all the way from about 135 AD to 1948. That's an interesting footnote to what we're saying.
It is.
But in any case, Hadrian was, on a rampage, but he was tempered by this letter from his own magistrate. And he wrote a letter back saying, no more of that. See, so there was on and off persecutions by the emperors, and there were local persecutions either conducted by the local magistrates or by populaces which were enraged against the Christians. But at no time did was Christianity popular, and in no place was it popular. And I just happened to be teaching this this year in the seminary, church history of the first 3 centuries. So that's how I know all these things. I've been reading a lot. There's an old saying, you never learn anything so well as when you teach it. The person who learns the most in the classroom is the teacher. Indeed. Because he has to formulate all of these things in his mind. And so I know all of these details about the persecutions. And so there was that was the problem. But at no point was it popular. And most of the population for those first 3 centuries was still pagan.
Yes.
And it wasn't as if, there was 90% of the people that turned Christian, or it was probably, 10, 20% probably at the most. Some people say 5% were Christian. So it wasn't some big movement that everyone was joining, getting on the bandwagon. There's nothing like that. It was a select group of people who were seen in a very bad light. That when Nero, it is most probable, and it's even the ancient historians say this, that Nero set the fire in Rome in 64 AD or thereabouts in order to clear a way for his golden house, right? This big, beautiful palace. And you can see the ruins of it to this day. And that when the population started to turn on him, he in turn blamed the Christians because he knew that would work. Because and this is the author, the historian Tacitus, who says this, they were considered to be the enemies of humanity.
Right.
The Christians, that's 64 AD, that they were considered to be the enemies of humanity. So the people were delighted. They were also accused of cannibalism and infanticide in their rites. And yes, that was the popular idea. It's like Protestants in the southern part of the United States who, think that Catholics worship statues and priests have tails and horns and things like that. All of this crazy stuff that would, that they would make up about Catholics. And so the population also had this detestation of Christianity because, it kept to itself. It was living in a debauched world, actually more debauched than our own world.
Yeah.
A totally morally corrupt world. And naturally, just as traditional Catholics pull in and keep to themselves and keep like a little society of their own going, they know each other, they talk to each other, they tend to stay away from worldly things. So also in those times, they did the same thing. And they didn't want any pagans at Mass. It wasn't as if you could just, walk into a church.
Yes.
You had to be vetted because you could be a spy for the government. You could, make some disruption. You could misunderstand what's going on and bring false report back. So, any idea that, everybody was so pleased to receive Christianity because it was so beautiful is just nonsense.
Yes.
These people had no, the early Romans, the ancient Romans had no sense of moral beauty. Their religion said nothing to them about morality, not a single thing about morality. It was a purely ceremonial religion. You go and you sacrifice to the gods for certain things, and you complain to the gods about people who might be cheating you or something like that. Purely ceremonial. It said nothing about morality, and their morality was absolutely awful. Just something that was stinking from the point of view of its perversion. In all ways, in all considerations, Hadrian himself, even though he was a general in the army, had a boyfriend.
Oh, gosh.
And he would take this young man around with him everywhere. Everybody knew it. So it was just a commonly accepted thing. And this young man was drowned in the Nile River by some accident, and when Hadrian was visiting Egypt, and there was this, great mourning going on because his boyfriend died.
Oh, gosh.
I mean, that's just to give you an example.
Not only that, we had Christians on tap as a source of entertainment, a bit like the Super Bowl today.
Yes.
Just drag them out of their homes and throw them in the Colosseum.
Yes.
And it's to a certain degree similar to today's age, where we have got a debauched society. As you said, it's not as not as bad as probably what the Roman Empire was back then. But we have to do a bit of that now as traditional Catholics. There's some certain amount of vetting you have to do before someone, you just don't accept anyone to just walk into the church and start receiving Holy Communion, so to speak.
Sure. There's a lot of
do you believe what we believe, etc.?
Yes.
So that's a very interesting introduction to the historical scenario. And as the author says, this notion that it was just the beauty of the Christian religion was the reason is a bit ludicrous.
Yes,
I mean, it is beautiful, but
the crucified Christ was a scandal. Think of an electric chair, and that's what the cross was. When Romans saw the cross, that would be like you looking at an electric chair.
Right.
And this was the use for putting slaves to death and various criminals that were not Roman citizens. And the cross, as I have often said in other shows, the apostles arriving in Rome were ignorant Jewish fishermen in the eyes of the Romans. The Jews were rebels in the eyes of the Romans, so they were despised in the Roman Empire because they were constantly rebelling against Rome. And so they had to preach a religion of purity of doctrine, purity of morals, and that the Roman gods were all false, and that the one true God is a crucified Jew. You couldn't get, if you had to make a recipe of what would be disgusting for a Roman from the point of view of religion, that I'm going to worship as the one true God, a crucified Jew, that I have to give up all of my sexual immorality and lead a pure life. I have to be faithful to my wife, etc., and that I'm going to hold these sacred state gods that protect the Roman state as all false. And, those state gods, nobody believed in those state gods. I don't know if you know that. They were a fixture that, maybe some of the lower ignorant classes did, but as superstitions. But anybody that had any brains and education thought all of the Roman gods were just a lot of nonsense. But they were upheld by the state, and that was Augustus who brought back the cult of these gods as a symbol of the state. And so that if you're a Roman, you will cultivate these Roman gods, and that was the way in which the whole empire was sung together, was by this external cult given to these Roman gods. See, and that's why it was so important for everybody, no matter what religion you were, to sacrifice something to the Roman gods as a way of showing your loyalty to the state.
A political tool.
It was like the Pledge of Allegiance in this country.
Yes. You
see, so now they accepted the Jews on that. The Jews would not do it. And they, because it was a little province, well, okay, you don't have to sacrifice to the gods. But as the Christians increased, the whole empire was filled with these, everywhere you could find these Christians. They enacted this Roman god business, and that you had to sacrifice to the Roman gods. See, so to say that you're going to worship a crucified Jew, you're going to give up your immorality, and you're going to turn on the Roman gods. You couldn't get a cocktail that was more dissatisfying than that. So
Yes.
all the beauty in the world isn't going to attract you, unless you're a person who is truly interested in the truth. See, it did attract people who were interested in the truth. Our Lord said, those who are of the truth hear my voice. And yes, there were people in Rome who were interested in the truth, just as there are people now who are interested in the truth. Just as there are people now who see something wrong with the Novus Ordo and who start searching. They typically go on the internet and they read and try to understand. That is somebody who is truly interested in the truth and has a good disposition to the truth. If they pray, God will hear their prayer and lead them to the truth. But most people today are so either distracted or debauched or attached to material things or all sorts of other causes. They have no interest in the truth. They just don't care. They don't care whether Christ is God. They don't care whether the Catholic Church is the one true church. They don't care if they're in a false church. They just don't care. The only thing that matters is money and sex, maybe sports too, beer. Those are the important things of life. And what else would you talk about? What else would you think about?
Absolutely.
That is 98% of the planet's population, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd say you're spot on there. And as I said, there's very similar parallels to back then and today. Just on another matter, there's an interesting footnote, my lord, on bottom of page 151 by G.K. Chesterton, and he sort of implies that some people argue that it was a simple age, unlettered and gullible, as he says. He says that the opposite was true. The world and the church were both not only, quote, not only civilized, but rather complicated. So on the contrary, only the church was many-sided enough to fit the world. That, quote, the church had to be both Roman and Greek and Jewish and African and Asiatic. In the very words of the apostle of the Gentiles, it was indeed all things to all men. Christianity then was not merely crude and simple, and was the very reverse of the growth of a barbaric time. So it was almost like he's implying the antidote to this terrible world that was present at the time in the Roman Empire.
Yes, it was a world of refinement in the sense that it was not some barbaric world. They had some, they were guilty of gross immorality, but they had refinement. They had philosophy, they had art, they had literature, and that was empire-wide, especially in the cities. Maybe as you get out into the country, you had some, as we call them in the U.S., country bumpkins or hillbillies. But that's true of any place. But in the cities, you had refinement, and the church responded to that. There were some very intellectual people who wrote treatises of apologetics in order to defend the faith against those who were denying it. And these were addressed to emperors, Marcus Aurelius, one of them, and it attracted philosophers. So it was not just some sort of again, popular religion for the uneducated or the backward, because it was so beautiful. It just wasn't true. This was an uphill battle for the church to convert the Roman world, and God gave it the Roman world. I mean, you can see that Rome came together, at least, it seems providentially, that tremendous empire, so well established, so stable, and which combined all of the previous civilizations. It took everything together, and it governed as one great unit, which had never been seen before in ancient times. There were great empires, but it was just, marking land off. There was not government of a huge area. I mean, Alexander, of course, took a whole chunk of land in the Middle East and all the way to India, but that fell apart fairly quickly, and the remains of the Alexandrian Empire were rather small in comparison to the Roman Empire. But it was a phenomenon really that has never been reproduced. that so many different peoples were governed so tightly, but at the same time with enough slack that they didn't revolt. You know, everyone was more or less happy functioning in this empire. There was a great deal of trade, and I was just in England, and I was looking at some Roman ruins in England, and I remember reading an article not too long ago that, you know, the British are doing a great deal of archaeology in England, Roman archaeology, and they found things among the Roman soldiers that were imported from the Middle East.
Wow.
Which means that the trade was so brisk that things coming from the Mediterranean world were making it up to England and interior England. You know, that things that could never come from their own surroundings, and so they were getting products from, you know, all over the place. The equivalent of that has never been reproduced. Even the British Empire did not quite reproduce all of that, nor did it have the longevity of the Roman Empire. You know, so it seemed like a place, like a nest, so to speak, in which Christianity should make its beginnings. And then after Christianity was established, the Roman Empire blew away. And for no fault of Christianity, because, you know, the virtues of the Christians would have strengthened it, but for really the corruption of the people, as St. Augustine said, that's the reason why it fell. It's just the laziness and dissipation of the population.
So never seen anything in history except maybe the American Empire today.
Well, not really, though. I mean, there's influence, certainly. You know, there's... again, I was just in England. I was amazed at how people are asking about what's going on over here. That it's almost as if there's a tremendous influence. So they see themselves influenced necessarily by what happens in this country. And when I was in Australia, the same thing. They told me that they were more interested in who was winning the U.S. election than their own elections.
Yes,
and you know, it's true, but it nevertheless, I mean, that's just influence. The Romans had a political power and a unique commerce and economic power. There was one political unit of the Roman Empire, the same currency and same allegiance, you know, and that really among very civilized peoples. Yes. And that was never reproduced again, really. And so, you know, it seems to have been a providential thing that our Lord was born just at the beginning of this empire, under Augustus, that when Rome finally congealed and put its empire together and emerged as this superstate, that's when our Lord was born. And that is as I said, the nest in which Christianity was meant to build itself. But it faced a very, very difficult world, a world that hated it. And it was preaching a gospel that contradicted every single instinct of every pagan in that whole place. So that's a bit of an introduction to what we're going to talk about. That's a pretty lengthy introduction, as we've used up practically, though.
No, it's quite. I think it's quite relevant, though, my lord. And we have answered that first suggested cause, which is that Christianity was so beautiful that everyone just loved it, and while it is beautiful, it was very, as you've established, it was very misunderstood and hated by the majority, and that it was providential that our Lord, you know, founded His church at the time of the Roman Empire, so that God could use it as the foundation stone, if you like, for the spread of Christianity. So perhaps onto lesson 17. Paragraph 179. Yes. Second suggested cause is that the pagan world was prepared for Christianity. Once again,
by Judaism. This is completely absurd. Judaism was a religion that kept very much to itself and detested the Gentiles. The Gentiles for them were like animals. And to a great extent, that was true. I mean, they lived like animals. And they wanted nothing to do with the Gentiles. If you were a Jew in the diaspora, that means Jews as they were spread out among the pagans in the Roman Empire, if you had contact with Gentiles, like you sold them a pig or something, well, they wouldn't deal in that. But if you sold them something, gold or whatever, you would have to wash your hands and do purifications because you had contact with the Gentiles. So it is true that the Jews they were in all of the major cities of the empire. That is true. But they were not so numerous as to be a real presence, and they were detested in the empire. Claudius threw them out of Rome in the 30s AD. 30s or 40s AD. Threw them out. Again, we don't know the causes, but probably for insurrection and suspicion of it, because there was so much rumbling going on in Judea. See, so they were detested in the empire. Judea was considered the hind end of the empire. It's the only way to put it. I mean, it was just the province that you did not want to be sent to, and this was because the Jews disliked the pagans so much, and with reason they did, and they also felt that the pagans had no right to rule them. That's true. The pagans had no right to rule them because they were at that time God's people. In other words, they should be ruled by fellow Jews and kings that descended from David. So that's true. See, so Judea was conquered about 70 AD or so. BC. By the Romans, Pompey, and that's when the yoke was placed upon the Jews, and then they gave them the Herod to rule Judea, Herod the Great, who rebuilt the temple, but he was not a Jew.
No,
he was an Idumean. He became a Jew. He professed Judaism. But he was an Idumean, which is a pagan. He was a pagan. He was not by blood Jewish. He was not a descendant of David. He was not of the house of Judah. And so that was a sign to the Jews that the Messiah was coming, because that was in fulfillment of the prophecy of Jacob to his 12 sons. And he said to Judah, when the scepter shall fall from thy thigh, which means that when the house of Judah is no longer ruling Judea, or Judah, meaning the area of the Jews, that's when he who is to come shall come. In other words, the promised one shall come. So the Jews were already, from that prophecy, looking for the Messiah.
Yes.
And in other words, the reticence that the Jews had for the Romans was justified, and but that caused in the Romans a detestation of the Jews and of Judea throughout the empire. So you can't say that Judaism did anything for the paved any way for Christianity. If anything, it placed an obstacle in front of it. Yes. As I said, the idea of worshiping a crucified Jew for the Roman, are you crazy? Is this, it's the most absurd thing. He's an enemy of our state. These Jews are enemies of our state. They wish to overthrow the Roman rule in Judea. They make trouble where they are, and so forth.
Yes.
There was, it is true that some Romans and some of the ancient peoples looked to the Jewish scriptures with a great respect as being wisdom literature. There's that it contained a lot of moral teaching that was very high. And this is the reason why we had the three kings, because of the ancient peoples, those interested in the truth again, were looking upon these Hebrew scriptures as something very edifying. That is true, but they were not attracted to Judaism. Not at all. Not at all.
And they certainly didn't like the Jews at all.
They detested the Jews and ran them out in many cases.
One wonders what Pontius Pilate did wrong to get that posting.
Yeah, that's always a question. How did What did he do to get Judea? Yeah.
What did you do wrong? Like a punishment.
It could well have been. Well have been because it was a very small province. It was part of Syria as the big Roman province, and it was like a sub-province. And so it was not a very big job, and it was a thankless job. And they hated him, he hated them.
Yes. At least there's some agreement there. But on to number 180, my lord, is the notion that the pagan world was prepared for Christianity.
This is perhaps more absurd than the previous one. The pagan world, as I've already said, was so thoroughly debauched that it goes beyond description, and we could not even speak about on a family show some of the things that they engaged in. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
Their religion was superstitious. As I've mentioned before, the Romans believed that the entrails of an animal would tell you who's going to win the battle or who's going to be emperor, or if they were doing some pagan rite and a bird flew over, if it was the right bird, that was good. If it was the wrong bird, that was bad. These are educated people, but they were dreadfully superstitious, and then they were, as I said, sexually debauched, sensual. Their religion was merely ceremonial. It was just, you kill the chicken and then you offer it to the gods and you expect good luck. It had nothing to do with morality. And so the pagan world was not in any way predisposed to Catholicism. It was polytheistic. They believed in many gods. These gods were as debauched as they were. Again, you couldn't even discuss some of the things that the gods engaged in. It's just so dirty. It's just incredible. So you can't even compare the pagan rites and religion to Christianity. It just was another obstacle to Christianity. Yeah. And then also you had some of these bizarre religions that were prevalent in the empire that were actually worse than the polytheistic ones. They were weird, and I just don't want to go into them right now. But a lot of weird mysticisms that were prevalent, replacing the old superstitions. As I said, it was only very, very low classes that believed in the Roman gods. Anybody with a half a brain didn't, and so they turned to these other things that were very bizarre. But there was absolutely nothing that could compare to Christianity. There was no preparation for Christianity, absolutely none. So it's just not true. It's the only thing to say about it.
Exactly right. So on to 181, neither can Hellenic philosophy be assigned as the cause.
Yes, Hellenic, Hellas in Greek means Greece. I don't know where the word Greece comes from. The Romans called it Graecia, which obviously, the English word comes from Greece. Why the Romans called it Graecia, I don't know. And I really should know why the Romans called it Graecia. But when we say Hellenic, we're talking about Hellas. And to this day, the Greeks would say Hellas for Greece. And so this is, Plato and the Neoplatonism and other philosophies coming out of Greece. And these two were not in any way a preparation for Christianity, and also they were the property of a limited few. You would have to be a senator or somebody of means to have access to these philosophies. It was not the average person. It was not the dock workers who were reading Plato. And yes, Plato had, certain things about it, like the notion of the good and, certain things that might might be a preparation, might be it might alert you to something beyond the usual scum of the pagan world. But I mean, nothing. He had other doctrines which were very much contrary to Christianity, and you know, it's very remote. You know, it would just give you certain like an hors d'oeuvre, you know, just a taste of certain things that you might find in Christianity. But it was not widespread. It was confined to upper classes. All of that philosophy was confined to upper classes.
Yes.
So
it says in the text,
even read.
Yes. It says in the text that he was also associated with the mystic cults, and it joined forces against Christianity.
Yes. The philosophers of the ancient world were very anti-Christian. That's true. That's true.
So another cause is the theory that Christianity could assimilate all the doctrines and rites which were then prevalent in Rome and the world.
Well, this makes us laugh yet more. I mean, it becomes more and more laughable as we go on, that the church would in some way become ecumenical with the worship of Venus, or it's just so ludicrous that it beggars description. All right. The church had nothing to do with the pagan world, and spurned paganism. When I say the pagan world, meaning paganism, it had nothing whatever to do with it, and hid itself from it, and that there was no syncretism or idea of getting together with these religions whatsoever. As a matter of fact, the deacon would get up at what is the beginning of the offertory, and he would announce that all of the pagans, the Jews, and the catechumens now have to leave. So you could be there for the first part, but then you've got to go now. All of pagans, Jews, and catechumens. And that's why the first part of the Mass, if you look in your missal, is called the Mass of the catechumens, because they were permitted at that point. All right. And that's one of the things that the Novus Ordo Church has not revived, I noticed. You know, we were told back in the 1960s that we're going back to the early church. Well, I have not seen a deacon get up and say that all the pagans and the Jews and the catechumens now have to leave the church. I've never seen that, at a Novus Ordo thing. So,
on the contrary,
I'm sure they would throw in heretics with that too, because anybody that was not Catholic just had to go.
Yes,
and there's just these are gratuitous statements. Gratuitous means things that people say that have no basis in reality whatsoever, no proof. Just you say it and it sounds nice.
It's another one of those words I can write down. Gratuitous is a good Bishop Sanborn word.
Yes.
I'm waiting for absurd, my lord. You've got to weave that in. It's excellent.
I said absurd already.
Okay.
But when I heard that you were making this list of my favorite words, I went and looked up a whole bunch of alternate words for my favorite words, but I lost the list. So, but next time I will have it. So I'll surprise you with some new words. Yeah.
No, it's don't take it as a criticism. It's very much it's in that department of the flavour of Bishop Sanborn in the condemnation department. It's very good. We look for those words and we love them.
Yes.
So on to number 183.
Can the economic and political situation answer the question? Well, no. I mean, religion spreads because of economy and politics. Certainly not politics, because the Roman state detested Christianity. All right, so certainly not politics. Economics, how does that help religion? And the author points out, yes, the fact that there were Roman roads and that you had an organized empire, yes, that provided a place in which the faith could spread, but really anything could spread. Error could spread too.
Exactly.
It just means that there was a way, a lot of communication in a time when communication was difficult, and a lot of commerce and interaction And yes, that made it easy for the church to spread, but I mean, doesn't account for its rapid spread. It just means that it just had a certain ease in that way. But it had so many other obstacles to overcome that we already spoke about, that, you can't say, well, because there were roads or because there were boats or, common coinage or something like that, this is the reason for the spread of Christianity. Absolutely not.
Yes, indeed.
He gives the example, because you have a beautiful road, that doesn't mean you have cars operating on it. It's not the cause of the cars going down the road, the fact that you have a beautiful road.
Yes.
So,
cars might be able to go faster, but it doesn't make them go.
Right. There's no gas in the, or you would say petrol, or I don't know what. I'm so confused about what to say in English anymore. I was just in England. I had to learn all of their words. What do you say for what you put in a car? Is that petrol?
Petrol, yes. Or diesel.
You say that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, if there's nothing in the tank, you're not going anyplace.
That's right. Spot on. So, and then to wrap out this lesson, question on point number 184, it really sums it all up.
Yes. So he says, if these natural causes cannot account for the rapid spread of Christianity, how are we to assign a cause? The fact stares us in the face. There are no natural causes to explain it. To say that the devil spread Christianity is laughable. Therefore, the only cause that can be reasonably given is God. See, so yes, it's it had every obstacle in front of it. It should have failed. It should have been, if God had not been behind it, it should have been something that you read in a footnote of a history book. Something like all of those bizarre religions that came into the empire. Mithraism. You probably never heard of Mithraism, probably.
No.
But that was one of those, the Mithraic cults. It was popular in the army. You see, you'd have to be a student of that whole period. It would have ended up as something like that, one of the many religions that was being spread around the empire.
A paragraph in a textbook.
Yes, the Mithraic cults. So those were quite popular, as a matter of fact, the Mithraic cults. They were strange, really bizarre doctrines, yeah. So, as a matter of fact, one of the churches in Rome is built upon the foundations of a Mithraic temple, and that's the Church of St. Clement. And they did archaeology, and you can go down and see the Mithraic temple underneath St. Clement's in Rome.
Oh,
yes.
Wow. So, just to wrap out this lesson, the only cause that could be reasonably given is God and a miracle of God. This swift propagation of the religion of Christ, as it says in the text, is nothing less than miraculous. God approved by this worldwide miracle the fundamental and the substantial doctrine of Christianity, namely that the Messiah had come and was true God and was Jesus of Nazareth. So that's the wrap-up of that lesson. So on to lesson 34, my Lord, and it's entitled Objections Answered. There are a number of objections in the text put forward as supposed refutations of the testimonies, particularly of the martyrs that we've covered in the previous show. So if you can commence this lesson with the point put forward in question 185 that Nero persecuted the Christians because he wished to blame them for burning Rome.
Yes, I already talked about this in the introduction, that he was even at the time highly suspected of having set the fire himself. The fire, Rome was filled with a lot of old buildings, and it was always the project of the Roman emperors to get rid of these old buildings and build up new ones in marble. What we think of when we think of ancient Rome, we think of all of these magnificent marble structures, but Republican Rome was kind of a dump, frankly. It's not what you think of, from the movies. Beautiful marble and columns and all. By the 3rd century, maybe by about 300, yes, Rome looked pretty good. But the real commerce of the empire started functioning under Augustus. And that's when Augustus himself went on a big building splurge, and the emperors always tried to improve Rome, and so one of the things you had to do was get rid of the old stuff, and so he was highly accused of that. Also, he highly suspected of it. He wanted to pave a way for his golden house. If you've ever been to Rome, you know the Colosseum. Well, if you look just a little bit north of the Colosseum, essentially right across the street from the Colosseum, you see this hill. And on it there are a number of ruins, and that is the Golden House, what is known as the Domus Aurea in Latin. Right. And they call it that on the sign, the Domus Aurea, the Golden House. And it was, Nero's palace, and now it's only in ruins, but he had to pave way for that. And so he is accused of setting the fire, and in order to shift the blame, he went to the Christians, and he knew that they would be perfect because everybody hated them anyway. As Tacitus, who is a very respected Roman historian, said that the Christians were considered to be enemies of humanity. See, so it worked, and so he himself was very, very cruel to them. He illuminated gardens with he tied the Christians to poles and soaked them with rags containing oil, and then set them on fire to illuminate the gardens, some Roman gardens. So you had these human torches going up, and to the delight of everybody, that this is what we do with Christians. I mean, how anyone could be delighted by that, I'll never know. Even the most perverted person could be delighted by that, and not to mention the smell. I mean, the smell of burning human flesh. I mean, why that is a delightful thing, I'll never know. But he did that. That gives you an idea of, and he was another monster, morally a monster. He would be known to, and this is in Suetonius, another respected historian, he would get into his carriage with boys and carry on with them on the way over to the Colosseum. And, the rest of it is not able to be repeated on a family show. Yes. Okay.
Yes. So back to Nero, it's the only first recorded insurance job or false flag event in history. Yes.
So they were put to death for not for the fact that they set fire to Rome, but because people hated them for their Christianity, and they were truly martyrs.
Yes.
And then in 186, number 186 of the book, he makes the objection: the constancy of the martyrs, it has been argued, can be explained by their stupidity, their insensibility to pain, by their desire for glory or for worship after death, or by their desire for heaven. Okay. Again, this is really reaching down into the bottom of the dirty logical garbage can in order to come up with an argument. Or rubbish bin, you might say, probably, yes, where you come from. I found out, by the way, just as an aside to this, I was just in England, that we call the place where you bring your rubbish, we call it garbage. Yes. In the United States, as a garbage dump.
Yes.
Well, I found out that in England, it's a rubbish tip.
Yes.
And I said tip, and this was Dan Fitton. He says, yes, you take it and you tip the wheelbarrow.
Yes.
And it's called a rubbish tip.
Yeah,
so that was something.
We have the same in Australia.
You call it that?
Yes. Yes.
A rubbish tip. Well, I'll have to remember that the next time I go to Australia.
I think we get the notion of dump. I think they're interchangeable here in Australia. We've adopted a lot of the British mannerisms and terms, yes, like petrol and so forth. So, I think the American influence is so widespread that you get a lot of those terms are interchangeable, trash versus rubbish and garbage and so forth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So now I don't know how I got onto that. But reaching down into the bottom of the dirty logical garbage can.
Yes.
This is just perfectly absurd. They were not stupid. They were not insensible to pain. There was no hope of being worshipped after death as some sort of a Roman hero or something like that.
No.
And he says we're dealing with thousands and thousands of martyrs. We're not dealing with a few people. These are when you consider the 300 years practically of persecution, you're looking at hundreds of thousands,
yes,
if not millions. See? And so you can't call that many people stupid, insensible, or fanatics. There were senators among them. There were members of the imperial household among them. Trajan's relative, one of his relatives, it was his daughter or somebody close to Trajan, who was like the early 100s AD, was Christian. There were Christians in the army. Saint Martin of Tours was Christian. Saint Eustachius was a very well-known general. He was Christian, and various other members of the military were Christian. There were some later emperors in the 2nd and 3rd century who were actually baptized.
Right.
They were and were educated by Christians. This was not something confined to
the ignorant class,
fanatics. Yeah, some sort of people that were a half a bubble off, as we say in this country. That refers to a level. When you're trying to see if something's level, you have the bubble, and
yes,
if it's a little crooked, it's a half a bubble off. So these are people. Come on. This is really wasting our time by giving us objections like this. So no, they suffered, they died, they burn just as easily as anybody else, and they feel pain just as much as anybody else. So that's just pure.
Yes. So that really
absurdity. Okay, well that deserves absurdity. Yeah.
Well, that really answers. It really speaks to point 186 and 187 in the text. So you probably go on to 188, and
yes,
that's really. I'll let you take that away, my lord.
Yes, well, he gives the objection. Well, soldiers and those who are condemned to death suffer bravely, and in India, women have been known to leap voluntarily on the funeral pyre of their husbands. And Orientals, under the impulse of religious fanaticism, have thrown themselves under the wheels of chariots. All right. This is really, again, the same thing. These are anecdotal attempts at proof. We see this, this thing, or Hawaiians who throw themselves into the volcano to please the volcanic god. Or something like that. There's just no evidence for this. Christianity is so intellectual and appeals so much to common sense, natural law, that to say that these people are fanatics or mixed up or in some way off the beam, half a bubble off, or whatever else you want to say about them, is again absurd. That they are going to give up their lives for something that makes no sense.
Yes,
that is just because of a Hindu thing about husbands or something. Did you ever see some of the? To this day, people in India worshiping all those false gods. Gods that have heads of elephants, and they dress up and they put powder on their face. They have all of these festivals. I mean, this is what paganism is. That's the face of paganism. It's still very much alive in India. And this is what, you're going to compare this sublime Christianity to these excesses of paganism. It doesn't hold any water. And what was in it for them? I mean, if you became a Christian, you could be arrested at any time. Becoming a Christian in certain times of the empire, at certain times, was the same as a death sentence, practically.
And still, it's that ingrained search for the truth. And as you said, it's very intellectual. I mean, these people, thousands and thousands of martyrs, did not exhibit any of the signs of fanaticism. As you said, a bubble off. We would say, in Australia, you've got a couple of kangaroos in the top paddock.
Now let me memorize a couple of kangaroos in the top paddock. Is that what you said? Yes. All right. I'll remember that. And the next time I go to Australia, I'll use it. And for certain personalities, let's say.
Yes.
And
but it is absurd.
I'll use the word. That one.
I'll use the word, my lord. It is absurd to say that the thousands and thousands of martyrs who died in very strong humility, who just refused to budge because they knew it was the truth, and some of their stories. It is absurd to say that they were fanatics.
And it's also true to say that their very martyrdoms were attractive to people who loved the truth. If they were fanatics, that would not have been true. See, if you see somebody throw themselves into a fire because their husband died, you say, poor person has lost their mind, but the people saw that they were standing up for these things and being eaten by lions and various other tortures because they were intransigent in supernatural truth. And Tertullian says that he was the one that came up with the blood of martyrs is the seed of the church. These populaces looking at these things in the Colosseum and other places, not all of them, but some of them were moved by that. I mean, what do these people have? What do they know that we don't have and we don't know that would move them to adhere so much that they would undergo these tortures with such passivity?
Yes.
You see, that was it beamed truth to people that they have something, they possess something, they possess an interior peace whereby they undergo these things willingly in order to have eternal life and for something better than what's here, and that's what drew the people who were of the truth. That's what drew them to Christianity. And even though in many cases you really risked your life to become a Christian, even just to be Christian was a crime. You didn't have to do anything else but to be known, and you were denounced. If your next door neighbor didn't like you or something, you would get denounced to the magistrate, and that was the end of you. You would be dragged off. Yes, that was commonly true in the empire.
Speaks to that saying that the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. Is that the right way to say it?
Yes, that's Tertullian, who was active, like latter part of the second century, it's like 150 to 200, that area. That's when he was writing.
Yes, and the notion that all these people were willingly suffered death rather than renounce their faith really speaks to that notion that what do these guys know that I don't? There's something about them. So we'll perhaps wrap up the show with the commentary around Mohammedans also seeking death in their wars, and the notion that sometimes that the martyrs were suicides in 190 and 191.
Yes, well, as far as the Mohammedans, their heaven is girls, girls, girls. I don't know if you know that. No, it's true. It's carnal, garden of carnal delights, and so that's why, for example, they're so willing to blow themselves up, and if they do that for Islam, they automatically achieve this garden of carnal delights. That's what they believe in as their heaven. You see, the Christian heaven is anything but that. There's no marriage in heaven. There's no sex in heaven. It is the enjoyment of God. It is the supernatural beatific vision that enthralls the intellect and the will so much that everything else becomes irrelevant practically.
Yes.
So it's again a very uplifting intellectual religion that knows nothing of these, the Garden of Delights. That's what motivates them. Also, they have this license from Mohammed that if they that first of all that they can spread the religion by conquering peoples. Secondly, that they will automatically go to heaven, and if they die for Islam and so forth. That they have this violence that is so prevalent. It has been prevalent in them since the beginning. St. Thomas Aquinas talks about how the Muslims spread their religion and through violence and all, and he talks about it in a way that, as if everyone knows it. This is the way that it happened, and so that's the motive. Is this sort of this mandate to do these things in order to achieve this heavenly state that is promised to Mohammedans who do that.
It's appealing to the base desires, isn't it? The natural sort of bodily pleasures as opposed to something that is of a much higher plane, spiritual.
Yes. It's almost. Well, I can't think of a single exception. All false religions promise an extension of earthly life after death. That you'll go to a place where earthly life will be great. That's a hallmark of a false religion. It's the hallmark of the Novus Ordo. I know I say this over and over again, but it makes me sick. That at Novus Ordo funerals, the priest will get up at the funeral of the Italian grandmother and say that, well, she's making spaghetti in heaven. Yeah. See, that's a hallmark of a false religion.
Yes.
That she has led a good life. That means she's been a nice person. Doesn't mean that she necessarily said a rosary every day. Maybe she did. Italian grandmothers generally do that. Yes. But it's nothing about that. It's not as if she was a woman of virtue that stood up for the Catholic faith, or nothing about that. She was a nice person, She made great spaghetti. She did a great antipasto, and she was wonderful, and she loved her children, even even if they were criminals. That's and for all of that, she's now making spaghetti in heaven for God. So, it's superstition to think of such a thing, that somebody is enjoying life because she's making spaghetti in heaven, as if that this is heaven. I mean, if that's heaven, let's stay here. It's a hallmark of a false religion to say that heaven is an extension of human earthly life and a perpetuation of it. It is not. It is a total transformation of life, and as something that we, as St. Paul says, we cannot even conceive of.
Yeah, we only get
because it is so supernatural.
Tiny glimpse of it here on earth through the search for truth and life and love, which is a extension of God, I suppose. So the Mohammedans, to say that they sought it, they were just looking for that false religion's premise of carnal delights in heaven. And then the last argument is that some martyrs rushed into the flames so that they were suicidal, like they wanted goodbye cruel world.
Well, am I going to say that there was never a fanatic in the Catholic Church, and that the Catholic Church never ever had in its ranks some fanatics? No, I'm not going to say that. However, some of these people that he's talking about, some of these martyrdoms, were cases where they were faced with the violation of their virginity. See, and they preferred the flames, or they preferred to jump out the window or do whatever was necessary in order to preserve virginity, which is considered a martyrdom if you stand up not only for Catholic truth, but also Catholic morality. Yes. See, to preserve your holy virginity, that is a martyrdom. So, they have maybe were forced to the window, or they figured it's this is my only way out of protecting my virginity. Then that is not considered a suicide. That is considered a martyrdom. See, so it's not the same thing. It's not like I'm despairing and I'm going to jump out the window.
No, that's right. So face a choice: death or compromise your faith, and many of these chose death.
Or morals, or morals, Christian morals. Yes.
All right. So the last point in this lesson and for the show is someone says that the argument advanced is a vicious circle. That is, we prove the truth of the Christian religion from the testimony of the martyrs, and then say that he alone is a true martyr who suffered for the true religion. So
that's not true. This is not true, because you're looking at a historical fact that cannot be denied, and that is that a religion that had every obstacle in front of it and which should have died an early and horrible death as a religion managed to overtake a whole empire and become the religion of the empire in a matter of a little over 300 years. Not by conquest, not by anything, not by money, not by anything else than the spreading of the truth and the practice of virtue. That can only have been accomplished by the power of God. So there's no circle here. The question is, how do you explain that fact? It's a fact that is plain to all who are willing to read about it. And so it is to say that God must be behind this religion because it should have died an early death. And it didn't. It spread and spread and spread and became finally the religion of the empire. And also, again, spread throughout the world like no other religion.
Exactly right. Yes.
So there's no circle here. There's no vicious circle.
And the final wrap-up text, if you like, I always like to sort of put a full stop on this, is that it says in the text, God sustained the martyrs in the face of death in their profession of Christianity. In other words, God worked a miracle on their behalf. The divinity of Christ has been witnessed to by the martyrs in their thousands. So as we close out this episode, we've covered the testimony of the rapid spread of the Christian religion, and so I'd like to thank you, my Lord, for your time in being with us on this episode. Is there anything else you would like to add in summary before we finish up?
No, I think we've said everything. I think that anyone that is open-minded would say, yes, there is something divine in the spread of this religion, and it makes me want to look more into the Catholic faith.
Yes. So you've just returned from a trip to the UK, my Lord?
Yes, I just got back from the United Kingdom, and I said Mass there in London on Sunday. This past Sunday, that was on the 26th of March.
Yes.
And it was quite routine for we have to go, in principle, we go 4 times a year. Somebody from the U.S. goes 4 times a year. That was the original deal that I deal. Usually you get something in return, but we don't in a deal. But we didn't get anything. But in other words, to provide the Mass and sacraments to the people in England, I said I would provide a priest 4 times a year to the UK. So somebody has to go at the end of May again, and then I will go again at the end of July.
Right.
So I may even go in May. I don't know. I have to see. But they're asking for Father Eldrocker, though, because they like his sermons.
Right.
Apparently he gives these tell it like it is sermons. And so I've heard that around this country too. So anyway, I had a routine trip from that point of view to England, but it was not routine from the point of view of sightseeing. I went a few days early And Matthew Gaskin, who's our coordinator there in London, he took me to 3 magnificent cathedrals, which were built by Catholics for the Catholic Mass, but who have, been passed to the heretics since the Reformation. But yes, hijacked is a good word. So that was Salisbury. They would say Salisbury. I'm getting pretty good at the British accent. Pretty good. Wells and Winchester. And then I also went to my ancestral village.
Wow.
Which was Herriad. I'm saying it the British way. Yeah. South of Basingstoke. That's the way the British would say it. In Hampshire, or Hampshire, as they would say. And which is for people fuzzy about the geography, if you think of London, which is toward the east, this is about, 40, 50 miles west of London toward the water. So down, that's Hampshire. And so it's a little town, and yes, I have a book on it. There's some people in the state of Maine, which is the extreme northeast of the United States, where Sanborn is a very common name. And they did this whole book on the genealogy of the Sanborns in the United States. Wow. So it started out with this Richard Samborn, S-A-M, as in Mary, yes. B-O-U-R-N-E. He had 3 sons who got on a boat in 1638 and went over to what was Massachusetts Bay Colony at that time and settled in a town called Hampton, which is now the state of New Hampshire.
Right.
And so I always wanted to do that, just to find that place. I mean, I didn't feel any, tingling or anything like that. But I did see the church, which was pre-Reformation, from the 1200s. And I thought, if they were here from all of that time, they probably went to Mass. My ancestors probably went to Mass in that church.
Yeah.
So that was, I don't know, I don't know if they were originally from there. There is a town in England with my name, the old way of saying it and of writing it, Sambourne. That's the name. In Warwickshire, which is it's by Birmingham. There is a town, and there were some fairly well-known Sanborns in England, but it became Americanized with the N spelling, Sanborn, probably 1650s. So because it changed right away over in this country to Sanborn.
So were they Catholics when they went to the United States?
No, they were Anglicans. They were Anglicans, and my grandfather, George Sanborn, became a Catholic to marry my grandmother, who was Catholic.
There you go. That's the providence of our Lord. That's
Yeah, so I'm a mix of it. So Matthew says, what's your makeup? And I said, well, mostly Irish. But my grandmother was Reinhardt, which is German. And then my grandfather was of English extraction. So he says, well, that's quite a mix, the German, Irish, and English. I said, well, yes, the Irish is all anger. So the first 3 letters of Ireland are I-R-E, which is ire, anger. So that's where the anger comes from. Then I have the British bulldog, stubbornness and holdout, which I've always had. There was a certain, let's say, British bishop. I'll be nameless right now. A traditionalist British bishop, okay, who said of me right around 1983, he's like granite. He never changes. So I think that's the English in me, just hold out.
I think that's a virtue.
So then there's the German, which is, sort of, I guess, I don't know, precision and whatever. But it sounds like I'm bragging about myself, but I am sort of, that's the mix anyway. So that's, but mostly Irish. So there's quite a bit of anger.
That's why you get the condemnation department.
I'm in the condemnation department because I'm full of anger. Yes.
That's good.
And ready for a fight. The Irish are always ready for a fight. They enjoy fighting.
Yes.
So
yes.
That's I'm mostly Irish. So, but that's my English background, and that's the name. It was interesting. And then we saw HMS Victory, which was the great English battleship. I don't think they called them that at the time. Ships of the line, which Lord Nelson used to beat the French, the combined French and Spanish fleet off Trafalgar in 1805. And I saw the very spot. It's marked by a brass plaque where he was shot by a French sharpshooter. But he insisted on standing there in full uniform, in full view of the sharpshooters, because he had this premonition that he was going to die in the battle. And they shot him, and he died.
Right.
So they repaired the ship. It came back a wreck, and they repaired the ship, and it's 75% original, and it was a very interesting visit. Right. So you can walk the ship and see the cannons and the ropes and all of this. Very, very interesting. So he really, and then I saw the Roman baths. All of this in about 2 days. I saw the Roman baths, the ancient Roman baths in the city of, I'll say it the English way, Bath. All right, in Somerset, and so there I saw Dan Fitton and his family. And he took me to the ancient Roman baths, and that was also extremely interesting. So I really had a good time.
That's good.
And Europe and especially England is so packed with things to see, that you can hardly exhaust it.
Yes, and there's not a lot of. It's only a small country in geographically, so it's
yes.
You could very much fit a lot of things in a short space of time, unlike
yes.
Australia. So your challenge, my challenge for you, my lord, is to try and pin the Aussie accent and see if you can get that as successfully as you have the British accent.
Well, I have to be there more. You see, I go to
yes.
England more often, obviously, than Australia, but I was starting to get it when I asked Damien Arthur to distinguish for me time and tame.
Yeah.
Because he said something about an animal being very time. And I'm thinking time, and what does that mean? And I'm just thinking, what does that mean? And so I figured out what he was trying to say, and would make perfect sense where he came from. But that's really where you see that A that tends a lot to I, what we would call I, is very typical of the Australian accent.
Oh, it sounds like you've got it.
It's close.
Yes. Tame and time.
It's close.
Yeah.
Tame, it says, he did it for me. Time and time. It's close. I mean, I'm doing my best at the Australian accent.
No, it's not too bad. Very good. So we have to get you down.
Whether
here more
he's
often.
time, I don't know, but that's
No, he's definitely not. Not civilized.
Yes.
Okay, my lord. Well, look, once again, thank you for your time. And look, we're very much looking forward to talking to you again as we continue this series. So we'll say goodbye at this point, and may God bless you.
All right. Thank you very much.
All of us here at member-supported Restoration Radio hope that you found this show to be informative, helpful, and beneficial to you and to your faith. In return, please think of offering a Mass, a Rosary, or even a simple Ave for our work the next time you pray. For the Restoration, I'm Phil Stone. May God bless you.
This program was brought to you free of charge by the sponsorship of Novus Ordo Watch. See for yourself that the Church of the Second Vatican Council is not in fact the Catholic Church of the ages. Go to novusordowatch.org.